A moment that stands out in my mind, not necessarily for what happened then, but for what it added up to, and I think in some ways still accrues. I was about 22, 23. I just finished grad school, studying with Bill Ferris about Southern Studies. And I decided to go to Europe for the first time in my life. I traveled a lot in our country, but not overseas. And I felt that Western Europe was going to still be there, but Eastern Europe was changing, and more to the point, it was affordable. And so my goal was to go to the Czech Republic, and a week before I would have said Czechoslovakia, but I was there for the Velvet Revolution, and the country was coming apart in a peaceful way. And I was going through Vienna, and I was with a college friend I hadn't seen in a few years. And so we decided at the last minute to go to the Opera House, and I got to get a ticket, and I don't know if they had standing tickets or either they double sold a seat or whatever, but in the end, we were standing and we were behind a column. But the man who sold us the ticket, or was taking up our ticket, rather, I was talking to my friend, I gave him my ticket, and he said, "American?" And I said, "Yes." And he looked at me rather sternly, and he said, "You bombed this opera house." And I was pretty taken back, and I said, when we liberated Europe, I had a pretty terse, remark back, and that was the end of it. And I wasn't generally used to the person who's taking your ticket, whose organization is supporting, kind of, criticizing the audience, as it were. And I stand by such pride about what the American Armed Forces did there, and just as much, even more so, the Marshall Plan, the idea of a conquering nation deciding rightfully that we have a moral and human responsibility to help rebuild the lands. And so, as I thought about it, though, and going in to see Don Giovanni, and that's premiered there in 1788. It technically premiered in Prague the year before, and then other arias were added. So there's a Vienna premiere as well. And to see it some 200 years later was remarkable. And I thought about later, take the point of view of the humanities. What did that man who said that with me, the tickets, did he lose his whole family? What side as an Austrian was he on? And the idea that he had a life and a history that was being unpacked. And that was clearly, that war and the destruction of that war was something that he was channeling toward me as maybe representing a version of the destruction. And later that trip ended in Auschwitz in Poland at Auschwitz, and a very different kind of conversation about maybe what our nation's presence meant in that war. And what I believe is rather important is something that Andre Gide said. He said, "Don't understand me too quickly." And I believe that's a core idea of the humanities, that you just take it and you twist this ball and you look at it, and it's his point of view and my point of view. There's a 23-year-old version of this when I was a young man, and now I'm 25 years later, and I can see lots of perspectives. And I think that is, as much as anything, what the humanities mean to me, is that you inhabit the experience of others. So that I would have thought that I would have said a book. I love Faulkner and Welty and Robert Penn Warren and Natasha Trethewey, so many writers and poets in particular. But as I thought about this address, I thought, no, it was an opera, and it was the first time in a great city of that opera and Klimt's paintings and other things that Vienna still means to me. But it's also Vienna that Freud had to flee because he was Jewish. And so, again, that is the web of history, and that's why we need to keep digging deeper and deeper, and knowing, too, that it's not locked in the history books. For me, and now that I have a daughter who plays Mozart as a violist, that music and that history is not locked down, and it's living, and more importantly, it's still influencing me.